Wandering Warriors Cup 2 is a $22,000 tournament hosted by Microsoft, or sponsored by Microsoft, and then hosted by myself and Dave. It's been a couple years since we had the first one. We're both really pumped for it. I want to talk about the maps now and just introduce the whole map pool. The first map is called Boundary Brawl. And Boundary Brawl, the players start without a TC in the middle area. So usually you're going to see people build their TCs right away on the berries. And they're going to choose to take wood and whatever else over towards the outside. Now, there is sources of food on the outside for players to take, and we'll probably see that. But in the early stages, there's a lot of food right next to the town centers. In the past, all 4 rhinos were in the very middle, and so we had an instance where one player lost 2 villagers at the start of the game, resigned in the semifinals. That was Mr. Yo. And basically, we didn't want that to happen again. So it's still possible to run over here, steal some rhinos if you wish to, but there's still 2 rhinos clearly on one player's side. Makes it a little bit more certain that the start is going to be solid there. There's also the water. I expect some water play here. I think docking, netting, fish could work. Basically, it's a really crazy map. There's a lot of different things that can happen here. And again, this is Boundary Brawl. That brings us to our next map, which is Golden Hill. Technically, there's also stone on the hill. And sorry, the AI does not seem to know what to do, but the players will. And players start with their vills on the little island here. And usually you're going to see them, since there's no wood or food in the middle, you're going to see them, again, not do what this AI is doing and walk over here. Now, we made some tweaks compared to previous versions of Golden Hill just to make things a little bit easier. And we made 2 sheeps or pigs on the little crossing here. So players are going to have them as their scout. They're going to be able to scout around, look for additional boars after taking their first one. And there's deer, there's shorefish, there's some gold, and there's some stone. There's only 7 tiles of gold on the area over here where you're going to be booming. So eventually the middle is going to be very important, but kind of like Gold Rush. There is enough gold to work with. There are some relics too, so you don't necessarily have to rush fully towards the middle. There's also the water aspect of the map, which I think will play a really big role since these rivers kind of control the middle as well. And I remember some epic games from Wandering Warriors 1, where we had one player with the gold, but maybe less eco, and then the other player with the food and wood, trying to control the game. So should produce some pretty epic games here on Golden Hill. Next up in the map pool is Grapple. Grapple's a pretty boomy map, and the players will start off without a TC and with their 3 villagers and a transport ship in the middle island. Players will then transport away, build up on the outside where there's just endless resources. Stone, gold, food is just everywhere you look, and we're going to see some pretty interesting things here. Now, the middle water will become important. Compared to the previous versions of Grapple, we did add a few more fish. So maybe going double dock in Feudal Age to fight for water control there will be valuable. Maybe because the fish boom meta is so alive and well these days, we actually will see players try and dock here and add fish traps. Like, I'm not even kidding. I think that's something that some players might try and do. But ultimately, because of the stone and gold all around the map, this is a boomy map. And so we're going to see lots of big late game civilizations, I feel, and lots of 200 pop versus 200 pop action in late stages of the game. So a map for players who maybe prefer the boomy style and not the early aggression to choose in their drafting. Next up is one of my favorites, Houseboats. The players do start with the TC. They start with this little island here, and they have to continually ferry their villagers across to get resources. The water matters a lot because the water protects the town center. We'll also probably see fishing be a pretty big focus. Ultimately, just like a really hard map to play. It kind of was a meme many, many years ago, but in Wandering Warriors Cup 1 and also in the Titans League season, it produced really good games and is a really technical map. So excited to see how this one plays out. And it's pretty much the same version of Houseboat that we've had the last couple years. You may have seen it just because we put a lot of work into balancing out the gold and the stone and the resources, even the extra areas of food. All this stuff is pretty consistently around the map. So not an easy map to play. Maybe a map that you'll see underdogs draft a lot if they really want to catch a favorite off guard with, say, fast feudal and fire galleys on the front, or maybe sneak archers. Next up is Inundation, and this is an improved version of the map that already produced some really fun games in the past, so I'm super excited for it. The players start on a crossing. This is undockable water, by the way. They start on this crossing, and we'll usually go to the outside, because that's where you're going to find the majority of the food. But what you're not going to find outside is the majority of the gold. There's only the single tiles of gold spread around the map on the outside. So eventually, you've got to go middle. And what I'm kind of excited for is, will players TC in the middle right away? Because the gold's really valuable. But what you don't have here is a lot of wood, right? So you have like the deer. You could take some straggler trees. You could walk out here for wood and everything else. But then that's very exposed from the rest of your eco. In the past, we had a lot of like market abuse with Saracens. We had a lot of monks with Bohemians and Teutons because of the gold. But we have actually put some gold on the outside now. And we've also made things such as the crossings be more consistent. It's very easy for players to move all directions here with this water area now. And yeah, I just think Inundation is like a great map to prepare strategies for. And like many of these maps, it's not seen in other tournaments. So preparation could pay off. Next on the list is Mired. Mired has been seen in a couple other events here or there over the past few years. Was initially debuted in Wandering Warriors Cup 1. Mired, you've got 10 boars in this little swamp region in the middle, and you start with a horse. So usually you see the players build a TC right on a wood line, and then it becomes this massive battle to try and bring in as many boars as possible. After that, the possibilities are pretty much endless. You still have hunt around the map. You've got berries, you've got stone, you've got gold. The biggest wood lines are towards the corners. And I remember this map having everything. We had games end in Feudal Age because someone goes extremely aggressive. But there's also potential to wall up. Like walling here, for example, could keep you pretty safe if you're in Yellow's position. So lots of potential, usually produces some really good games. And let's not forget, the water is dockable in the middle. So maybe even some Dramens or cannon galleons could come out in late game, or even demo ships to shake things up. All right, next up is good old-fashioned Nomad. It is a Nomad tournament after all. The Wandering Warriors version of Nomad is meant to embody kind of the classic Nomad. And by that, I mean, it's not, you don't always know what you're going to get, and you need to rely heavily on scouting and adapting. So, like standard DE Nomad, if you play ranked, never has a landlock, ever. More often than not, there is going to be one side of the map that is landlocked here in Wandering Warriors Cup Nomad. Occasionally, you're going to have the ponds in the middle. Occasionally, you're going to have areas where it looks like it's a pond, but it's actually opened up into a little bay or river area connecting the outside. So yeah, just like water shape is different, land shape is a bit different as well. And so just different things will happen. It won't just be fast feudal wind water every single time. And each generation's a little bit different than what you're going to see here. So it's hard for me to really, say much more than that. Golden stone everywhere. You guys probably know the drill. If it's Nomad, it's just Wandering Warriors Cup Nomad, which Dave and I feel is superior. All right, now a map that we've never had before. In fact, I think the final two maps we've never had before in a Wandering Warriors Cup is, Piece of Pizza. So basically, you've got 3 different slices of the pie, and you've got slices that have 2 villagers in each. So players will kind of get to decide on how they want to distribute their vills, where they want a town center. In this case, we had town center going up here in the food area for both these players, which I think will probably be the most common thing, because that's where you might want more villagers to be. The southern quadrant has more stone than any of the other sections, and then the eastern quadrant has more gold than any of the other sections. So it becomes very interesting. You can eventually chop to the outside as well, where there's a bit of everything, and then there's relics too. So it's going to be fun to see what players end up doing here. I would imagine that a lot of people are going to just assume that everyone else is going to TC the food area, and maybe there's a way to combat that. Maybe there's something you can do to keep them away. Will we see players chop from this position towards the other position where they've town centered? That's also kind of going to be fun to see as the meta develops over time. So not an easy map to play. This one will probably require more practice than any other map, and I would classify this as more of a boom style map, but it could be very aggressive depending on what the players choose to do. Okay, then, and that brings us to our final map, which is also new edition. This map is called Stranded, and Stranded is a bit more consistent in how the water generates compared to standard Nomad, but you're almost always going to see a fight over the hill. Always an issue for wood on Stranded, whereas on other maps, it hasn't really been the case. You start with a fishing ship, and you start with your vills. You also start with a couple water buffalo, which you can use to scout. And you see the dock is up there for yellow, dock's down here for blue. But long term, it's going to be tougher to do things like castle drop because there's only one tile stones spread around the outside of the map. So it might not be as castle or tower heavy. And it might be a little bit more feudal army heavy because of the hill here in the middle. That's always going to be here. And that's where most of the wood is as well. Overall, because this is a new map, I do expect people to form different opinions on how they wish to play it. Some may play a bit heavier on water. Some may just ignore water and go heavy on land. I think it will produce some really good games. All right, and that's the overview of the maps. Short and sweet. I just wanted you guys to see the maps, hear my thinking on how I think things are going to play out. Our goal was to have a really nice mix. So I think for the standard land map players, you have those maps. For like the classic Nomad players, you've got that too. And then you also have maybe more of the boomy style maps for the players who are more comfortable with that. Now, this tournament is short and sweet. It starts in like 4 or 5 days. There's going to be games all the time the first week or two because we've got those 2 rounds with so many different players. And it's going to end on December 8th. So Dave and I will both be covering a lot. In the first week or two, we're going to be covering different sets than each other, most likely, because we want to cover as many different sets as possible. And there won't be any super distinct schedule the first 2 weeks either, because it's just going to be like there's sets happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's just going to be happening all the time. So just keep your eye out around the scene. I'm sure there will be plenty of casters covering the games. Now, I'm recording this on a Tuesday. On Friday is when the brackets are formed and made, and we have our 128 players. I am going to record a video where I show the bracket, talk about like which is the group of death, etc., and just think about predictions. Because with these types of settings, there's a lot of potential for upsets, and there are some players who really specialize in Nomad styles that you might not know about. Those who watched Wandering Warriors Cup 1 knew there were some storylines there with, say, like the 1700 elo Duity beating the 2200 elo Margugu at the time. So let me know what maps you like the most, what you're most excited for about this tournament. Just give me your thoughts in general. I'll look in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch video about maps. That's pretty cool. I appreciate that. And hopefully you enjoy the tournament. Thanks, guys.